There are a lot of developments in the Israel-Hamas war in the past week. While most of the eyes are focused on Gaza and the hostage deal, some critical developments have also occurred in the West Bank. The IDF has launched a major operation there. Meanwhile, 60-day transition period of the ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon is due to end on Sunday. Israel has recently announced it is not going to withdraw from Lebanon as planned. I'm Alon Burstein. Let's dive in. The three main arenas in the Israel-Hamas war over the past week have been the hostage and truce deal in the Gaza Strip, the IDF's vast military operation going on in the West Bank, and the ongoing developments in southern Lebanon. Starting with the truce, the hostage deal, and the hostage situation more broadly. On Sunday, January 19th, the deal between Israel and Hamas came into effect. Despite initial setbacks and Hamas's delays in delivering the list of hostages that would be released, the deal has broadly held up thus far. Three Israeli hostages, Romi Gonen, Emily Damari, and Ron Steinbrecher, were all released after 471 days in captivity. On that same day, the IDF retrieved the body of Oron Shaul, an IDF soldier whose body had been held in the Gaza Strip since 2014. With that, the number of hostages remaining in captivity in the Gaza Strip is now 94. On that same day, the three hostages were released. In exchange, 90 Palestinian prisoners who are held in Israeli jails were released. These are all either female prisoners or minors that were held in Israeli jails. Simultaneously, a truce has been called in the Gaza Strip, and little to no violent activity has taken place over the past week since that truce was called. On the humanitarian front, the World Food Program reported on January 24th that since the truce began, upwards of 4,800 aid trucks have entered into the Gaza Strip, with a substantial amount of aid being diverted specifically to bakeries and food production capabilities throughout the entire strip. In addition, the IDF has also begun preparations for redeployment in the Gaza Strip as part of the deal. This is supposed to take place in the coming days. However, it hasn't taken place yet. During the first week, what was supposed to take place, which has happened, is the hostage release, the release of Palestinian prisoners, the truce, and the increased entrance of humanitarian aid trucks. The next major day of the hostage deal is going to be Saturday, January 25th, when several things are due to happen. First, 4 more hostages are due to be released. Hours before I recorded this, Hamas transferred the names of the 4 hostages, all of whom are female IDF soldiers that were kidnapped on October 7th. That is Karina Arayev, Daniel Gilboa, Naama Levi, and Liri Elbag. They are all due to be released on Saturday. Within Israel, there is currently debate about how to treat this list of hostages that are going to be released, since, according to the terms of the deal, all live children and female civilians that are held hostage are supposed to be released before the IDF soldiers, and there are still 2 female hostages and children in captivity. These are Shiri Bibas and her 2 children, and Arbel Yehud. Hamas announced close to a year ago that Shiri Bibas and her children have been killed in an IDF airstrike, and while this was not confirmed in Israel, the fact that they are not on that list is to some extent not surprising, not on the list of live hostages. However, there have been no life signs nor any statements of death about Arbel Yehud since she was kidnapped. It's also important to note that Yehud is held by the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and not by Hamas, which further complicates things in trying to understand what has happened in the current stage of the deal. At this moment, it is very likely that Israel is going to protest but not blow up the deal, since, like I said, it is unclear if this is a violation of the deal and the Yehud is alive but not being released before the IDF soldiers, or if Hamas is actually living up to the terms of the deal and that Yehud is already dead. If the 4 female IDF soldiers are in fact released, then Israel will release in exchange 200 Palestinian prisoners. These include 120 quote-unquote heavy prisoners that are serving life sentences in Israeli jails. In addition to this, a second element of the deal that is due to take place on Saturday is that Hamas is supposed to deliver a list detailing how many of the 33 hostages that are included in the first phase of the deal are alive and how many of them are dead. In Israel, it was initially reported that Hamas will state who of them is alive and who of them is dead. However, the wording of the deal does state that the organization will, quote, provide information on the number of Israeli hostages that will be released during this stage. Thus, the group is very likely to only give a generic number of how many hostages are alive and how many are dead. However, it is possible that there may be some clues there as to the fate of Arbel Yehud. Third, on this day, Saturday, Israel is required to withdraw from the coastal Ar-Rashid road and for the first time begin to allow Palestinians to return to northern Gaza. Israel has stated that they are not going to withdraw from the Al-Rashid Road until the 4 hostages are released. At this point, it seems likely that the 4 IDF female soldiers are going to be released, and Israel will withdraw from the Al-Rashid Road. If you want more details on the mechanisms through which the Palestinians are supposed to return north, I refer you to my previous video where I discussed the hostage deal. It is important to note, however, that while the deal does say that there will be an international monitoring mechanism to ensure that armed Palestinians aren't returning north, at this point, there's been no publication on how that mechanism is going to work. In fact, it was stated that the IDF is still working on this, so it remains to be seen how this is actually going to take place in the coming days. In another moment of analysis, I'm going to say that it is also very likely that with Palestinians returning to northern Gaza, we're going to see more friction between the IDF and Palestinians, because the IDF is only withdrawing from certain parts of the Al-Rashid Road. Likely this will lead to more complications within the deal. Alongside the truce in Gaza, a second major development over the past week relates to the West Bank. As part of the efforts of the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu to both secure a majority in cabinet to approve the deal last week, while at the same time ensuring that his government does not fall, in the cabinet meeting where the deal was approved, Netanyahu pushed through the demand that was raised by the head of the religious Zionism party and finance minister in Israel, Bezalel Smotrich, and this was to officially expand Israel's war aims. The last time this happened was in September of 2024, when the war aims were expanded to include the safe return of Israeli civilians to northern Israel, and this precipitated the IDF invasion of Lebanon that happened several days later. This week, the war aims were expanded to include a focus on the West Bank, specifically stating, and I quote, "The war aims will include significantly damaging the capabilities of terror organizations in Judea and Samaria," that is how the West Bank is referred to in Israel, "and strengthening the defense security in Judea and Samaria, emphasizing the safety of settlements and roadways," end quote. The aims were also expanded to add offensive plans for the IDF to round up weaponry and curtail the activity of terror organizations in the West Bank. It was also expanded to increase the amount of soldiers that are allocated to the West Bank to a number that at least matches the amount of soldiers that were allocated when the war broke out on October 7, 2023, to, and I quote, "continue arrest operations, targeted assassinations, securing safety of roadways, and imposing restrictions when needed for safety," end quote. And finally, a clause was also added that the amount of soldiers that are allocated to the West Bank cannot be reduced without another cabinet decision. Following this update of Israel's war aims, between Monday and Tuesday, the IDF launched a massive operation in the West Bank town of Jenin. The name of the operation itself appears to be associated with the expansion of the war aims, because the official name of the entire war in Israel is Swords of Iron, and this operation in Jenin has been nicknamed Iron Wall. The operation thus far has included the substantial invasion of armored divisions as well as border police and Shabak units, accompanied by airstrikes that are also taking place within Jenin and within the refugee camp that's affiliated with Jenin. Intensive gun battles have been reported throughout both Jenin and Jenin refugee camp. The Jenin brigades, that is a conglomeration of different Palestinian militant groups, have also reported detonating several explosives on IDF vehicles. It is also important to note, Jenin is known to be a hotbed of a lot of terror activity. The Palestinian Authority itself launched a major operation in Jenin well over a month ago in order to try to curtail some of this activity. However, right now the IDF is launching almost an unprecedented operation in this, at least in the last several years, in Jenin, and this at this point is associated with the expansion of those war aims. Thus far, Palestinian sources are reporting that at least 14 people have been killed in this operation in Jenin. Among them, the IDF has reported that several terror operatives have been killed, including those that are directly responsible for attacks that occurred against Israelis in recent weeks. In addition, there's also been reports of substantial expansion of roadblocks and checkpoints that the IDF has deployed throughout the entire West Bank. Specific reports relate to Ramallah, Jericho, Nablus, and Hebron. There's also been an intensifying of both Palestinian and settler violence in recent days in the West Bank. However, for timing purposes, I'm not going to elaborate on this here. If it continues, I'll try to put out a special summary on this violence between settlers and Palestinians later on. And finally, turning to another major arena that has been going on in the last week, the 60-day transition period of the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Lebanon is due to end on Sunday, January 26th. According to the deal, during this period, the Lebanese military was supposed to deploy its forces south of the Litani River, that is in southern Lebanon, adjacent to the Israeli border, rounding up Hezbollah weaponry, destroying infrastructure, and assuming positions to ensure that Hezbollah does not operate in this area before the IDF fully withdraws from Lebanon. There have been conflicting reports with regard to the extent to which Lebanon has in fact lived up to its obligation during these 60 days. On the one hand, the military has deployed upwards of 6,000 soldiers south of the Litani River, and according to some reports, it has carried out over 100 operations to neutralize Hezbollah infrastructure and round up weaponry. The reports added that a third of those operations were the Lebanese military's initiative, and the rest were done following requests that were made by the International Monitoring Mechanism. Likely, this is a result of complaints that Israel gave to the mechanism, which then relayed them to the Lebanese military that did, in fact, take action. On the other hand, Israeli intelligence has also reported that the Lebanese military is not being nearly as effective as they would like against Hezbollah violations of the deal. It was also noted this is particularly in those areas where the military units are made up primarily of Shiites in Lebanon. The IDF also reported to the Israeli government that intelligence indicates that Hezbollah is beginning to find new ways of concealing its activity and trying to increase its activity in southern Lebanon. After a lot of backs and forths in the last several days, on Friday, Israel officially announced that due to the delays in the Lebanese military deployment in southern Lebanon, the IDF will not evacuate all of its positions in southern Lebanon once the 60-day period is over. I will say it's important to note that the IDF has already withdrawn from some positions in southern Lebanon, such as El Hayam and Anakora. However, Israel has stated that withdrawal will not be completed since the Lebanese military has not fully deployed in the area. The announcement also said that this is being done in coordination with the United States. In Lebanon, this came under heavy condemnation. Hezbollah announced that if the IDF does not withdraw from the country, this will be seen as a substantial violation of the deal. However, I will say in a moment of analysis that even in Hezbollah's announcement, it's important to note that the group did not threaten that they will therefore retaliate or break the ceasefire. Instead, they called upon the Lebanese state to deal with this violation. It is therefore quite likely that we will see harsh condemnations from Lebanon and possibly even small-scale attacks by Hezbollah in response to the IDF not withdrawing. At this stage, though, it is unlikely that this will lead to complete collapse of the ceasefire. What remains to be seen, however, is how the Lebanese military is going to respond to the fact that the IDF did not withdraw. Is the Lebanese military going to speed up its deployment in order to compel the IDF to withdraw from southern Lebanon, or are we going to see more of a stalemate situation, the Lebanese military holding its positions and the IDF holding its positions, and then remains to be seen how the sides get out of this. The deal says that after 60 days, there will be a phased withdrawal. Israel is saying it's going to wait for the Lebanese military to deploy. Remains to be seen if that in fact does happen, and will we see that withdrawal happening in the coming weeks. That is my highlight on the recent developments in the Israel-Hamas war. If you find these reports informative, please do remember to hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications so you'll know when reports come out. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'm Alon Burstein. I'm a visiting assistant professor and Israel Institute fellow in the Department of Political Science at Tufts University. Thanks for watching.